welcome into another episode of Talkin Ducks. We have a lot to get to today. We'll dive deeper into the Holiday Bowl matchup between Oregon and North Carolina. We'll have some news and notes from around the conference, specifically discussions about Caleb Williams and Jonathan Smith. Also, the transfer portal, it continues to be out of control. We'll update you on that situation, and we'll end the show with our own awards for best this, best that related to Oregon this season. All right, it's time for our opening drive, brought to you by Les Schwab. We'll bring in our main guys on this show. Next to me, of course, Anthony Newman and Joey Harrington. Guys, it's official. Jordan Kent has entered the transfer portal. He's in negotiations with Talkin Huskies, Talkin Trojans, Talkin Golden Bears, Talkin Sun Devils. So this just may be my show from here on out. What do you guys think about that?
He'll be back. I trust him. The grass is not greener on the other side. He'll be back.
As you're going to hear me say many, many times throughout the course of this show, who cares? Like, I don't care. I don't care. A new host will come along. Like this is the state of talking college football now, right? Talking Ducks, talking.
They just come and go, right? Like, they come and go.
Seriously, it's free agency. It's just he probably got an NIL deal somewhere. There's no loyalty. The sports talk show genre is completely gone. It's gone. It's not what we know anymore. So he can leave. See ya. We'll bring someone else in.
No, you have someone else in. Me.
Oh,
hey,
you?
All right.
We're stuck with you?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were like the temporary,
Jordan,
like the interim,
we'll see you soon,
like
Jordan.
interim
We'll
OC.
Mr. Jordan.
All right, let's get to something legit and serious. North Carolina bowl game, December 28th, San Diego against Oregon. Their star quarterback Drake May is going to play. However, they lost their top receiver, John Down, 1,000 yards this season. Joey, let's start with you. How big a deal is this for Oregon to have to deal with this cat? Because he's pretty good. Even though he lost his best receiver, he's a good dual threat quarterback, and your defense hasn't been very good against the pass this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I've studied North Carolina film or let alone seen him play more than, a quarter and a half of football this year. I have seen Drake May play, and he's really good. He's explosive. He's, he's that fiery leader, that guy that people gravitate towards. I mean, there was talk of him potentially entering the draft, but he's, not eligible, obviously. He's a special type of player. So losing your wide receiver, yes, is it going to hurt? Of course it is, but it's not something that's going to break that team because they still have him on board. And you know what I also love is the fact that, there was talk of him, why aren't you transferring somewhere? He said, it's special to wear this baby blue. It's special to wear this Carolina blue, and this is where I'm going to be. So that is the type of leader that really brings a locker room together. On the field, he throws the ball extremely well. He runs the ball extremely well. And when you're looking at a defense for Oregon that, frankly, collapsed at the end of the season, collapsed against Oregon State. What you thought was the strength of the defense, the rush defense completely, just gave up in the second half against the Beavers. And now what was the Achilles heel, your pass defense, you've lost the best corner on your team, arguably the best corner in the conference. So yeah, it's going to be a test for this Oregon defense. But I don't want to say bowl game. We kind of had this discussion last week. Bowl games are different, right? Even with all that going on, like all of this is more about Oregon than it is about Carolina, right? This is more about who they are as a program and who wants to show up on that field. Because there's transfers, there's, people leaving for the draft, there's some guys who may or may not show. Like, who's going to be there? Who's going to strap your pot on in that locker room and show up on the field? And that's why I think it's more about actually the Oregon team than it is who they're playing for Carolina.
Okay, Newman, as a defensive back, Oregon's been struggling in the secondary at times. You know that the pass rush hasn't been there. You lose your number one corner. Is going to be a first or second round pick in the NFL draft. How do you approach this game against a guy who put up 4,100 yards? I'm looking here, 35 touchdown passes, only 7 picks, and he rushed for 650. and 7 touchdowns as well. What do you do, Newman?
Well, I think the best defense is that you just pray. No. Hey, Oregon's, they have some.
That might have been his best comment
still have-
all, like the entire series, like the history of this show. I've never heard him go that
was
Death Star.
wow.
No,
I don't even know how to react to that.
I'm just joking. There's going to be more than praying going on. Oregon has some. They still have some dudes on the defense. You got Noah Sewell, linebacker, running sideline to sideline. Jeffrey Bossa is another linebacker. Brandon Dorless, D-line. Williams in the back end. You got some guys who can still cover and do some things. You got to play as a unit, and sometimes you don't have that superstar on your team, that guy that leads the team and everybody follows, but you have a team. You have other guys who can do some things and scary on defense. North Carolina, they have the same problems too. They lost a bunch of corners. All their starting corners are gone. I mean, how are they going to deal with Oregon's offense? And then you said that, Aaron, they lost their star receiver. So both teams are losing guys. It's all about the guys that are staying. It's all about the guys who are buying into the bowl game and then trying to, compete and win that bowl game. And also working towards, I'm here for next year. I want the coaches to pay attention to me because I want to be a starter next year. That's what this game is all about. You're going to lose all kinds of people, and it happens. And Joy, you said this last week that these bowl games are not like they used to be. These guys are not, hey, this bowl game is the best thing in the world. We get all kinds of stuff. We have some fun. No, they're all about, nah, I don't want to play that game. I'm moving on. I don't want to get hurt, all this. So it's changed. But the guys that are playing for Oregon's defense, there's still some dudes out there.
Okay. So now we've talked about how it's probably going to be likely that Oregon's going to give up some points against North Carolina, but Oregon's a 13-point favorite for a reason, and that's because North Carolina doesn't stop anybody on defense. And you just talked about them missing some guys as well. They give up 160 yards rushing on the ground. We know how good Oregon's rushing game is. Do you expect the Ducks to dominate on the ground in this game?
For sure. There's no doubt. Oregon runs the football. You still have those offensive linemen coming back to play. You still have, running backs. Bucky Irving is a dog. I mean, that kid is unreal. Noah Winnington is a dog. And those two guys, they led the team, all year running the football. And we talk about the offensive line, and we've been talking about this all year, how good they are. But let's go back to the running backs. These guys have a lot of yards after contact. Sometimes there's not a hole there, and they make some great moves, some spin moves in the hole. They're juking guys, they're running over guys. One tackler's not bringing them down. So the running game is going to be big time. And I said this, North Carolina, they lost, I think 3 corners are gone. 3 corners took off and go, I'm going to the draft, or I'm going to transfer, I'm out of here. And you talking about the receivers for Oregon's offense? Oregon's going to put up a lot of points. It's going to be, the question is, can North Carolina stop Oregon?
Now, Joey, you would imagine, given what Newman just talked about, that Bo Nix will be licking his chops, looking at that secondary. But he will be getting play calls from someone new because Dillingham has moved on to become the head coach at Arizona State. So you, as a former quarterback, I don't know if you've ever dealt with that yourself, or whether you have or not, what does that mean to the quarterback, knowing that you're going to be getting a different set of play calls, maybe a different eye, a different mindset, a different strategy from a different play caller?
I would say it could potentially be not an issue, but it could potentially be different. I mean, what was it? I'm trying to think. A couple years ago, Oregon's offensive coordinator missed a game. I think it was the game there at Stanford.
Moorhead.
Remember that? Yes, Moorhead missed the game a couple of years at Stanford, and they ended up losing. Did they? No, maybe they. Anyway, there is a connection between quarterback and coordinator. Right? There is. Like, I remember having those pre-game meetings the night before games with Jeff Tedford, and we would literally just sit there and just go through that ready list, top to bottom. What do you like here? How could I call this for you? What do you like in this situation? And you develop a rapport. You start to anticipate. You know what guys are going to call, and that's helpful, right? Because you can then prepare accordingly. I think Bo has shown enough resiliency. He's shown that he can adapt. He's shown that he can, I want to say, jump from one place to another and deal with maybe a little bit of being uncomfortable. So I'm not worried about it, but there is the potential that there could be a little bit of a distraction. But just because there is a pretty special relationship between quarterback and coordinator.
All right, guys. Next up, the transfer portal for Oregon continues to grow. There are more people jumping into it before we even started this show. We'll talk about that next on Talkin Ducks.
You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
All right, now it's time for What's Cooking with Sam's Northwest Barbecue. And what's cooking right now is that transfer portal. It is popping. Every time I go online, another Duck has entered the transfer portal. 13 right now. A lot of them 4-star kids who are pegged to be stars in this program. They are Audi 5000. Gentlemen, alarmed at all? Or it's just, hey, this is just the new way of things in college football, and you'll lose 13 guys and you'll bring in 13 more?
Joey.
I mean, look. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, I don't want to say my canned response is who cares, because it's not that dry. But this is college football is gone. College football is done. Like we have to come to this realization that, with the exception of a handful of players, right? We are going to see guys coming and going every single year. And they're going to be guys who contributed. They're going to be guys who got to play a little bit, maybe got to play a whole heck of a lot, but had a disagreement with the coach or didn't like something. They can just pick up and go now. That, you made the point, like 4-star guys or 5-star guys. Well, those same 4-star and 5-star guys from other schools that don't play because they're stacked behind somebody else are going to turn around and they're going to come back across and they're going to end up on our roster. So it's like, it's pointless to me to sit here and lament the loss of, a certain star player or somebody who is a high school. It's literally what we talk about, Aaron, every week. Like, these recruits who coming in, they're a 4-star, they're a 5-star, they're going to change the world. 1 year later, they're gone. Like, okay, cool. Like, until you get onto the field and contribute in a truly meaningful way and establish yourself as, call it a Noah Sewell, call it, Ferguson, Alex Forsythe, like whoever it is, there's always going to be someone coming back to take your place. And that's the reality, whether it's somebody on your own roster, whether it's someone who's transferring across to find a new spot. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and worry about, well, can we replace this person or this person's leaving, because this is what college football is now. Like, you're going to lose 10, 15, 20 guys every single year, but you're going to have 10, 15, 20 new guys coming in to take their place. And just because we don't know who they are, or we didn't fawn over them as a 4-star recruit out of La Brea High School and, in California, it doesn't mean they're not good players, right? It doesn't mean they're not going to come in and contribute. So I don't know. I think part of it is just the frustration of what college football has become and the NCAA's lack of their inability to do anything about it. And now we're kind of just in this Wild West where it's like you just throw your hands up and say, all right, let's see who shows up on the field next year.
So, Newman, are you maybe a little less indifferent than Joey? Because Joey just checked out. When you see names like Mataval, Seven McGee, Butterfield, Dollars, Thornton, who was a big, you were a big fan of him, Joey.
I was.
And of course, Justin Flo. Justin Flo was supposed to have 88 sacks, right? And 1,000 tackles a season. Guys built like Tarzan. What do you think when you see these names in the transfer portal and out?
Well, for a man who didn't have a lot to talk about it when you first asked the question,
he took up the whole segment, didn't he?
Joey took off. He ran with it. So, no, let's be honest. We're from the old school. It's weird for me, and it's strange because that's not what I'm used to. When guys come onto a team, they compete for a job. They want to start. They want to play. I understand that. It seems like the competing is kind of going out the window, because if you go to compete with another guy for a starting spot and you lose, you're saying, I'm out, I'm gone, bye-bye. It's like, wait, what? Or you want to be the star and you want to catch more footballs, and so I'm out. Bye-bye. That's. I mean, Joey and Aaron, yourself, we used to have to compete for playing time. We had to go at it for year after year after year trying to get on the field. And that was fun for me. I wanted every year going, you know what? I'm getting on the field this year. I mean, I'm going into my second year in the league or third year in the league. I'm going to get me a starting spot. Forget this. I can't wait to train in an offseason to get ready to compete for that starting spot. That's gone. You guys are just ghosts, which is so strange. But I'm not going to question what they're trying to do. And hey, they want to move on? Move on. We didn't know at the beginning of the year anything about Noah Winnington. We didn't know about Bucky Irvin. We knew about Bo Nix, but we knew about the Bo Nix, the gunslinger that would throw some bad balls. That would, he was doing too much. Now these guys, that's all we talk about because they came from another program. In 1 year, they're stars here. So Aaron, you said this. There's going to be more guys coming in. You're going to get another 12 guys coming in from different programs, and they're going to be ballers for Oregon.
Anthony, I gotta jump in here though. But I want to say we're talking about two different things, and this is really, I mean, this is a discussion for almost an entire show. What you're talking about is the competition, the commitment, the making a commitment to a school and saying, I'm going to come here and I'm going to compete, and this is my family, this is my unit, right? That's that is one side of this discussion, right? About whether or not somebody is willing to stay in there and compete. And that is the reality of college football, which has changed, right? You can literally just go bam, 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 and wherever you want to go. What I think the way the question was posed to me from Aaron was along the lines of like talented players leaving. But like you just said, we all thought Byron Cardwell was going to be the running back this year. Nobody knew who Bucky Irving was, right? One of those guys is on his way out the door, and the other one was an all-conference tailback. Like, talent will come and talent will go. It will literally like changing, like ships in the night. But there is something to be said, and I'm curious what is going to happen to this idea of committing to a place, committing to a team, a university. That part it's gone. That truly is gone. And unless we go to Aaron's idea of the coach's protected list and transfer portals, like the NCAA has let has opened Pandora's box, and that part is I mean that it's over and done with.
But my second part of the answer was just that. Bucky Irving, Noah Winnington, we didn't know about those guys. We're thinking that we had Byron Cardwell. We're thinking if we're losing running backs, we lost Travis Dye. We were like, okay, man, that's crazy. Why would he leave? Now we have, and then we got running backs who we didn't even hear of before the season, and they're stars for Oregon.
But is that a good thing?
There's a lot of good football players across this country that will be dying to play for Oregon, and they will get them.
And we got one of them. Dante Thornton takes off, and Cat from Alabama comes in, Aaron.
True, but here's the thing that's the problem with it as far as I'm concerned. Back in the olden times when you had to sit out a year, right, and I think Travis Dye actually graduated, so he probably could have left anyway. Dye would have been your running back this year, and Cardwell would have been the backup. And that's how it was back in the day when you had LaMichael and then Kenyon, then LaMarca left and Kenyon took over. But today, Kenyon would be out because he wouldn't want to play behind LaMichael James, right? When you had Tyner and Byron Marshall and then Royce Freeman, like someone would be leaving as opposed to Byron Marshall moving to wide receiver. You don't have that continuity. You can't get to know guys. It's just going to be these mercenaries coming in and going and going. So how do you, as a fan, how do you really latch yourself on to guys that you know who are going to be here 3 years and playing when you know that guys, if they're not getting what they want, they're just out?
And that's literally my point of going, just like, what do you do? Like, how do I as an alum, how do I as a, part of that Oregon football family, how do I develop a connection, right? How do you as a fan, like, actually have somebody to root for, right? Like, part of what was so great about college football, and please don't mistake, don't think that I am lamenting the old ways of college football, because there are very clear things that needed to change. But what was so great about college football is that you were able to watch these players develop. You were able to watch them be start as that freshman or sophomore or build their way up through the depth chart, and then all of a sudden it's like they earn that spot, and maybe that's just kind of the romanticized version of, what we thought college football was. But yeah, that's gone. I mean, Ontario Smith, he would have been gone. He wouldn't have sat behind Maurice Morris. Like, see ya.
You might have been gone. Hey, listen, think about this too. When you latch on to guys, that sort of captures the imagination of fans. Are fans going to, at some point, just basically just ignore everything until the game starts and go, oh, who's on our roster? There's not going to be any following of guys or wondering how someone's developing or anything like that. It's going to be like you and I are right now, Joey. It's like, okay, yeah.
I was waiting for you to say, class. You mean like you, Joey?
Yeah, like you sign this recruiting class, call me when they actually play in a game for more than 2 years, as opposed to guys who might even just play 1 year and then they're out. So it does hurt the dynamic of the sport. However, it is what it is. What are you going to do? And they will get some good dudes in. So we'll talk more about that down the line. We'll break down the incoming Impact players on a later show. All right, guys, coming up next, Jonathan Smith got paid big time. Is that good news or bad news for the Ducks? Because it looks like the Beavers are going to be good for quite a while.
You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
Now it's time for Excellence on the Field, brought to you by Ferguson Wellman. And guys, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little Oregon State Beavers. Don't run away. This is topical. It has some kind of relevance to Oregon. The Oregon State program has locked up Coach Jonathan Smith for 6 years, right? At $30.6 million. That's the most they've ever paid an entire coaching staff down in Corvallis. He makes more than Dan Lanning, by the way. So let's start with Joey. One, push aside, the fact that you're a Duck and just be a football analyst for a second if you can. I know you can. What does this mean, not only for Oregon State to get this done, because Jonathan Smith has done wonders down there, but what does it also mean for Oregon, knowing that there's a dude in Corvallis who's beat you twice in the last 3 years and he's not going anywhere?
Yeah, well, first of all, Jonathan Smith is a friend. He and I competed against each other for a few years there on the football field, and I've gotten to know him pretty well, and he's a fantastic person. So I'm happy to put aside the Oregon alum feelings. First of all, it's fantastic for the conference. It's fantastic for the brand of the Pac-12 conference, for the power dynamic, right? The conference was at its strongest when the Pacific Northwest was dominating and you had USC. Well, USC's gone, right? So we need that power to shift back to the Pacific Northwest. So it's great for the conference. Two, it's great for the Oregon State. I mean, let's be honest. He is exactly who they have needed to rebuild that program, and has them on the verge of, what are they? Are they a 9-win team right now? 8-win team? They're on the verge of a 10-win season. I mean, that is unheard of from a couple years ago. It's bad news for Oregon in that, like you just said, Jonathan Smith is going to have the Beavers ready to play, and he's going to have them ready to play for the better part of the next decade. So Oregon better be ready when they play Oregon State, because this is going to be a fight again. No more cakewalk, no more rolling over, beating them by 50. This is going to be an Oregon State team that's going to fight. I mean, technically, they have the title. They have the crown for the state right now, but they are going to fight to win back this state. And Jonathan Smith is the guy who's going to do it for him.
So, Newman, you have a potential son-in-law, I believe, that played for the Beavers. I don't know if I'm overstepping there or not, but...
Is Anthony recusing himself from this? Does he have to,
No. So, I imagine maybe
you've
heard some
here?
inside info on Jonathan Smith as a coach, maybe here or there. I don't know. But what's your impression of Oregon State making this very bold, aggressive financial move with Coach Smith, and what does it mean for the Ducks?
Well, you're right, Aaron. There's a young man in my house quite a bit.
Eating your food, wearing a Beavers jersey. How you allow that? No. You gotten soft, Newman. You getting soft.
Wait. Yeah, I just turn my head when they're wearing that Beaver shirt in my house and all that. It's tough. It's tough. But I do hear this a lot. I hear positive things about Coach Smith. Jaden is just always, really giving good praises for Coach Smith on what he does. He's a player's coach, and that's the biggest thing that I hear, that, guys want to play for him. They want to make sure that they don't want to disappoint their role model, their coach, their big brother, their father figure, all that kind of thing. So that's what I hear. He's a soft-spoken guy, and Joey, you know him. He's a competitor. He doesn't have to speak loud for people to listen, and he's by actions in what he does. So, his coaching staff, they love him. I know the guys, they kind of stay together. You don't see a lot of coaches changes within that organization. He's going to do some good things in the Pac-12, and we'll see how the Pac-12 goes and where it goes. But he's one rock that's stable, and Oregon State should be taken care of for the next couple of years.
Little note there, he's the 5th highest paid coach in the conference right now. Next up, we'll talk about Caleb Williams winning the Heisman for USC, and we'll compare him to the last Pac-12 Heisman winner, Marcus Mariota.
You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
Next up is our legendary moment brought to you by Abby's Pizza. USC quarterback Caleb Williams claims the Heisman Trophy, the first Pac-12 player to do so since Oregon's Marcus Mariota in 2014. Gentlemen, let's start with, first of all, was Caleb deserving? We'll start with you, Joey.
You can't say he wasn't deserving. This was a year where you didn't have a true standout runaway winner. He was a tremendous player this season. I think you can make an argument for most of the guys in that room. My only criticism, and it's not about not to him at all, but more the process in general. I don't like the fact that it's become the quarterback on the best team. Right?
It's been that for like 70 years. What are you talking about?
No, I mean, we used to have Orlando Pace in the room. You used to have Julius Peppers as part of the discussion. You used to have Charles Woodson. You used to there was legit. I mean, with the exception of Devontae Smith and the occasional Alabama running back, it's quarterbacks. I'd like to see some more players considered for the award. But yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams was as deserving as anybody this year.
So Caleb Williams, 47 total touchdowns, 4,700 yards, projected to be probably a top 5 pick when he does come out. Newman, how does he compare to Marcus? Now, I know you're probably gonna be pro Marcus. That's fine. I'll be pro Marcus too. But how did you compare the two? Is it comparable? Is maybe Caleb a little bit better?
Well, there are two different types of quarterbacks. Marcus was out on the edge. I mean, and I know Williams was also, but Marcus would take that ball and go 60 yards for a touchdown, in a heartbeat. Williams is that kind of a pocket passer, but he has the ability to run. What I'm impressed with Williams, that you come from a different program. You transfer, and then you do the same thing that you were doing, in Oklahoma, and you take care of business with a bunch of new players. You have the same system, but you're still working with new players in a new environment. That's pretty good, man. That's, again, it goes back to that transfer portal. Everybody's changing teams, and you change teams, and then you win the Heisman. Wow.
For me, I think Caleb's a better passer, but Marcus might have been a better all-around college quarterback. I think Caleb will probably have a better pro career. We shall see. But Oregon could have another quarterback in the mix next year. For the first time since Marcus, that would be Bo Nix, who's probably going to return. What do you guys think his chances are to maybe at least get to New York, Joey?
I mean, it's got to be as good as anybody's. For a brief moment there, week 8, people were talking about him as a dark horse for the Heisman this year. If he continues to do the things next year that he did post Georgia and pre-injury, I mean, this is as good a quarterback as there is in the country. The way that Bo played during the middle part of the season. So yeah, he's got to have as good a odds as anybody. Ironically, probably the 3 of the favorites, and Penix and Caleb are all going to be out here in the West.
Newman, real quick, who do you fear most if you're playing against them, Nix or Penix? The cannon or the dual threat? Ooh, it's tough.
Bo Nix scares me more, just because he can do more with his legs. He'll buy time to throw the football, or he can take it 60 for a touchdown.
Great stuff, guys. Next up, we're going to talk about the bowl lineup for the Pac-12. The conference has not won a bowl game in a couple years. How desperate is the Pac-12 to notch some victories this bowl season? Up next on Talkin Ducks.
You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
Now it's time for our rock solid pick, brought to you by Milan Stoneworks. Okay, The Pac-12 has 7 teams in bowl games. They have lost their last 7 bowl games. 6 teams, I believe, finished ranked this season, which is a big number. That's huge. That speaks well to the conference. But gentlemen, don't you get more street cred by winning bowl games against top teams from other conferences? We'll start with you, Newman. How important is it for the Ducks to get some bowl victories?
Well, they have to. You know, the Pac-12 is trying to get some attention. And we can't if we keep losing bowl games to other conferences. So we have to win. And it's important for Oregon to take care of business and all the other teams from the Pac-12 that are in bowl games.
It bugs me that bowl games have been marginalized so much and people actually just don't care. Not only players, sometimes coaches, fans don't care. To me, I think they should matter because it's part of building the basically the resume of your program. So Joey, given the fact that the conference hasn't won a bowl game, like I said earlier, since Oregon defeated Wisconsin, how important is it that this conference rack up a few wins here?
Well, it's big. I think the biggest knock on any conference is, not winning the college football playoff. But if you're going to, start from where we are, which is at the bottom, you got to start by winning some bowl games. But I think the bigger, if you look at it in a bigger picture, part of the criticism of the Pac-12 is that they were top heavy and then nobody else, right? It was Oregon and USC and then everybody else stunk. This year you had, 6 teams finish in the top 15? I mean, this was a solid group of football teams. And so I think if you're going to have any, this year, as opposed to any other, is going to be the year where if they don't go win the bowl games, right, you had the narrative from years ago. Okay, fine, now you're all ranked in the top 15. Go do something about it. So this is a year where they have to, since they're not doing anything else.
All right, be sure to stick around. The Pac-12 has given out some awards, and we're going to do the same here on Talkin Ducks next, starting with Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and Game of the Year.
You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
The Pac-12 awards are out. The Ducks had 6 players, first or second team, 9 honorable mentions. So we're going to give our Oregon awards, starting with Offensive MVP. Joey, don't make the obvious pick.
What's that?
Be creative. Be creative. Don't make the obvious.
Okay. So the obvious pick is Bo Nix. And I don't think, even if you wanted to be creative, you could make an argument that would supplant Bo from that spot. However, I will try. Alex Forsyth. Alex Forsyth was the leader of the best offensive line in the country, allowing 1 sack through 8 games. And I would argue that his injury played as much of a role in Oregon's struggle at the end of the season as Bo's did. You saw what Bo missed when Alex was out. You saw it was night and day. Yes, of course. Is Bo Nix the offensive MVP? Sure. But you have to give Alex Forsyth credit where credit is due. He was the anchor for that offensive group and allowed everybody else to do what they were able to do.
Newman, any additions to that?
I'm going to get creative by having 5 guys be the MVP, but you can't do that, so I'm going to go with Bo Nix. But I'm going to say the whole offensive line. They were outstanding. And led by Alex, but they were outstanding. Honestly, the run blocking, pass protection, played smart, not a lot of flags against them. Bo Nix, though, is the dude. If you're going into a football game, how do you stop Bo Nix? He's the guy that he's the captain of that ship, and yes, for sure, MVP.
We talked earlier about the Heisman being so pro quarterback. I get so irritated with MVPs and Super Bowls and things like this. That's almost always the quarterback. But if ever there was a case where it was like, it's obvious the quarterback, you take Bo Nix away, they win 5-6 games, maybe. I just think his impact was immeasurable. So while I agree, the offensive line is the most important entity, I believe, on this team, but the MVP was definitely Bo Nix. Now, Defensive Player of the Year, we're going to start with you, Newman, this time. Who you got?
I was going to go with Bennett Williams, but Gonzalez is the corner. To have a great corner who can do everything, who can tackle well, who can play safety, who can play the deep ball, who can play the short routes, just all over the field. And most of the time you have a corner on one side of the field, so he's not a big-time impact player, but Gonzalez was all over the place. He was a baller. And again, another guy who transferred, didn't know a whole lot about him, and he made some plays every single game. He was consistent in his play.
Yeah, he's a great example of what happens when you have a really good player out there who's on a bad team and says, I want to go to a good team. So Oregon probably is going to make out well in this whole transfer portal thing, and he's a prime example of that. Joey, your pick for Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah. I might have to go with Brandon Dorlus. Okay, look, here's why. Was he a very good football player? Absolutely. Will his talent translate to the NFL? Absolutely. The definition for me of the most valuable player also includes making others better. Also includes, and it's hard for me to say that the Oregon secondary got better because of Gonzalez when they were the Achilles heel of that defense, right? For the majority of this season, that defensive line anchored by Brandon Dorlus. And I know DJ Johnson, but Dorlus was top 10 in the conference in tackles for loss. Look, that rush defense that Oregon had for the good majority of the season until the second half of the Oregon State game was really what kept them in ball games on the defensive side. So I think the way that he was able to disrupt things in the backfield was a better team player, or made the other people around him better, allowed them to be better. Whereas, had Bennett Williams and the rest of that secondary been better against the pass, then maybe I could say that about Gonzalez. But I got to go with Dorlus.
All right, next up is Game of the Year. I think clearly probably the biggest win for Oregon this year was the UCLA game. I guess we could go Utah maybe. They beat the Pac-12 champs, but I think in terms of how they pulled it off and what it meant at the moment, I'm going to go with the UCLA game. But to me, the Game of the Year in terms of just sheer entertainment value and drama was that University of Washington win at Oregon. That game had a little bit of everything. What say you guys, starting with Newman? I'm
going to go Utah. And I'm going to go, there's a guy that Joey just talked about, Brandon Dorlus, made some key stops on fourth down, in 3rd and 1, getting in the backfield, making a tackle for loss, stopping a good running football team. The game was 20-17. That was a team victory on offense and defense and even special teams. So I'm going to go with the Utah game.
See, I think you guys are forgetting, what's it called, recency bias, right? You guys got all wrapped up in what happened during the season, during the middle of the season and at the end, and Oregon's going to be in the CFP, and can Bo be in the Heisman conversation? What got him there? If they hadn't come back on the road at Washington State and won that football game, we would literally be having a completely different conversation. We would be talking about which quarterback is going to be transferred in, whether anybody's going to travel to the Independence Bowl. That was that was the moment that this team gelled. That was the moment that this season became tangible, right? Because we're still rebounding off of that Georgia loss, and they beat who was it, Portland State or whoever they played in the second week of the season?
Eastern Washington.
Yeah, Eastern Washington. What kind of team is this? They go up to Pullman and are down. Were they down 2 touchdowns? They were down 2 touchdowns there in the 4th quarter. It was dicey. And Bo takes them down the field and absolutely, that could have been disastrous. Instead, Bo showed everybody, including his teammates, who he was, and that was what got this season rolling so that we're even able to talk about this conversation in the Holiday Bowl at the end of the year.
All right, we'll conclude our award presentation with Most Improved and Biggest Surprise, plus a bonus category up next on Talkin Ducks.
You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
All right, let's continue with our Talkin Ducks award show here. Next up, Most Improved Player. I think this is a very interesting category. I know who I'm going to pick, but I'm a little biased based on the position. Let's start with you, Newman. Who was your most improved player this year for the Oregon Ducks?
Troy Franklin, without a doubt. Big-time receiver, making big-time plays every single game. And I always look at players, are they consistent in their play, high level of play? And he was very consistent, and he was the guy that, hey, you had to know where he lined up. He could take a top off the defense. He ran the short routes. Most improved.
Joey?
There's a couple different ways you could go here. But what about somebody who switched positions and then switched positions again and then became a key? Like, I think of DJ Johnson, and like, do we forget that he was a tight end before Lanning got in there, right? Like, all right, let's throw this guy back into the D-line and see what happens. Well, what happens is he finishes the season in top 10 in tackles for loss. I mean, he and Brandon Dorlus, those two guys on the inside, were the keys to this defense, especially at the beginning of the season when Noah Sewell and that linebacker core, they were struggling. They were struggling to come together. And it was those guys on the defensive line that kept that defense intact. So I got to go with DJ Johnson here.
Well, I'm going to go with Troy Franklin, wide receiver. I think we've been waiting to see a big-time impact receiver of this caliber for a while. I think Johnny Johnson was close, but not quite at this level. I think Franklin does more. So I'm going to go with him because I think Oregon had to have that guy who could blow the top off the defense to help change the passing game. All right, biggest surprise player of the season. Let's go with you, Newman. Who was your biggest surprise? Mainly, I guess it's different than improved, but surprise player that just caught you off guard.
Well, Bucky Irvin, the running back. I mean, at the beginning of the season, I was talking about Byron Cardwell. I was talking about, the running game of Byron and how he played in the previous year. Bucky Irvin, I didn't even know where he was from. I was like, who's this guy? And he's not that, that massive, gigantic running back. He's a guy that's, 5'10", weighs about 190. But wow, that's what he did. He wowed me. I was like, wait, who is this? And every game, it was like, wait, where did this guy come from? Let me look him up. Let me see who this guy really is. Biggest surprise.
Joey?
I got to go with Bo. And I know it's tough, again, recency bias, to go back to the beginning of the season and remember where we were. But the conversation was, is it Ty Thompson? Is it Bo Nix? Is it Ty? Is it Bo? Okay, well, if Bo has another game like he did against Georgia, then it's time to move on to Ty Thompson. Like, let's not forget that Bo Nix was not this superstar coming in at the beginning of the season. He was a guy who was cast aside. Sure, he was a highly recruited high school kid, but you know how I feel about highly recruited high school kids. Like, this was not a sure thing. And it wasn't even a sure thing, especially after that first game. So the way he not only righted the ship, but brought everybody along with him and put the team in a position to be a game or two away from the college football playoff in that discussion, I think that was an incredibly surprising thing.
100%. It's crazy to think that going into camp, it was allegedly the competition was up for grabs, which I think was nonsense. We all knew that Bo was the guy just based on what we saw in spring, but people were fearful of this because a lot of people still thought Ty Thompson was the next Herbert or Mariota because they were told he had 5 stars by his name, right? And people knew that Nix wasn't great at Auburn. Listen to the jumps this guy made. Career completion percentage, 59.4 at Auburn. He completed 71.5 at Oregon. He'd never thrown for more than 25.42 at Auburn, threw for 3.388. 8.9 yards per attempt compared to 6.9 at Auburn. And he had 27 touchdown passes. He came into the season with only 39 on his career, and that was in 34 games. And one of my biggest things was that his touchdown per attempt rate was lower than Anthony Brown's. Well, he blew all that up by not only being really good for Oregon, but being a potential Heisman candidate. That's by far the biggest surprise. He made a fan out of millions of Ducks fans, and he may be coming back next year to add another season on top of that. So absolutely for me, Bo Nix. That's it, guys. We made it through another show with me hosting. You guys good?
Nice job, Aaron. Nice job.
I appreciate that.
I'm proud of you.
I'm not good. I'm going to transfer.
Okay, Joey's going to enter the portal with Jordan. Regardless, whoever is hosting next week, we will be back with another episode of Talkin Ducks.